we could move on to our list that we both made. So, essentially, what we did here, we compiled a list of our top 20 playoff performers. At first, we were going to do 15 because we weren't sure that it was going to be. Uh, we had like enough players to make a top 20, but honestly, like it was kind of hard to make the top 20. Like, I ended up having a few
Yeah,
honorable
there
mentions.
were some big names that I had to leave out because honestly, there were just guys that did better than those guys that I didn't list.
Before we mention the honorable mentions, though, like what went into your mindset on like creating this list? Because like for me, it was kind of difficult. I tried to balance like playoff success, so like how far you got into the playoffs with your numbers, or like how important you were to the team, whether you're like the first or second option, stuff like that. So that's all like I had to like struggle with and try to balance. But like, what was your mindset going through it?
For the most part, same. Definitely. Part of it was individual success. Another part of it was team success, how far the players got in the playoffs, and then like consistency also for sure. Like for example, if like one of the players made it really far, they did really great one series, but then they didn't do super great another series, definitely dock them down for that if that was the case. But yeah, definitely a lot of different factors there. For the most part, the main thing was a little bit of a balance between individual success and team success and consistency.
Right, right. Okay, so yeah, we're kind of similar on our ways of thinking, but let's see if our lists are any similar. Because for some reason, I have a feeling that it might be like crazy different. Which, not gonna lie, I made my list like
Might be.
an hour ago. I didn't put too much thought of through it, but like I did go through their stats to see like how well they did, and yeah. Do you want to share your honorable mentions before we go talk about our top 20?
Yeah, I'll share my honorable mentions. And I will say because it was like challenging to like some of these guys were a little bit tough to leave out. I listed quite a few honorable mentions, I will say. Ultimately, I think I'm just gonna list five though.
Yeah, I have
Yeah,
five as
there
well.
were a few guys that I listed here. So, sharing the results in three, two, one.
Ooh, we have very different names, but
Very different, yeah.
okay. I asked you first, so you can share your five honorable mentions.
So, my honorable mentions I listed were Drew Holiday, Nas Reed, Miles Turner, Jalen Williams, and Chet Holmgren. Um, yeah, for the most part, honestly, some of these guys I considered listing in the top 20 because their teams got pretty far, they had pretty good impacts, and for the most part, pretty consistent. Um, Ultimately, these guys didn't make the list because there were just other dudes that like I felt like did more. And for the most part, some of these guys are like more of the underrated guys in my opinion, I think. Um Ultimately speaking, I felt like these guys were worthy of a mention. And not to like I was gonna say not to like spoil your honorable mentions ahead of time before you reveal them, but there were a few guys I considered adding on my list also that ultimately did not make the cut.
Okay,
And
and
I guess I can. you why after you reveal your guys.
Okay, I feel like I know why because well, I'll review my guys, which
Yeah,
is
reveal your list first.
it includes Damian Lillard, Jamal Murray, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and James Harden. And I feel like the reason why you didn't put some of these guys is because most of them got bounced in the first round.
Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. But I was gonna add on. So okay, for the most part, I'm gonna be honest. Most of these guys on your list here, honorable mentions, did not make my top 20 either. Um, I did put Jamal Murray on there. But I will say this, okay? For the most part, the reason why I didn't list those guys is because they got bounced really easy. Um, I'm gonna say specifically why I didn't list Booker and Durant. The reason was because their their plus minus was so bad in those
Yeah, I
series.
saw that,
Devin
especially
Booker,
Durant.
Devin Booker, yeah, Devin Booker was a minus 12 and Kevin Durant was a minus 18. Like they were putting up numbers, but like to be swept on top of that, like I couldn't put them on my list. And I actually thought about putting them. I kind of did give them a mention in my honorable mention originally, but then I thought, yeah, I think these five guys are more worthy, so I left them out.
They're the honorable
But yeah,
mention for your honorable mentions. Is that what you're saying?
yep, honorable mentions for the honorable
Fair
mention.
enough. Fair
Yeah,
enough. But
but yeah, for the most part, all of those guys you listed were early outs. And then for me, most of these guys like made it pretty far, but a little bit more on like the role player side.
I do
So
like your Miles Turner pick. Miles Turner and Nas Reed definitely should be uh, shouted out. They both had a good run. Also, True Holiday, but
yeah,
like he's a Celtic now.
honestly, I thought it was mostly Drew and Nas that I contemplated putting on my actual top 20 list. But then there was like, oh shit, I forgot this guy. He needs to be on the list instead. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Um,
was hard. We were talking about like, we can't make like a top 25. There's not enough players to talk about, but clearly like it was pretty
we're
difficult.
wrong.
Yeah, we were wrong, but
Because honestly, if we did top 25, I probably still could have listed five honorable mentions, honestly.
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So should we actually get into this? Get into the top 20? Seeing how different our uh honorable mentions are, I'm very curious on what our top 20 is gonna be like. And I'll spoil one thing
Definitely.
before we share. I do have a good amount of
Okay.
players that like were bounced from the first round, so don't be too
Okay.
surprised about that. But yeah,
I do have a I do have a few guys that were bounced in the first round also, I will say that. Um but yeah, shall we start by reviewing 16 to 20
yes, let's do
or
that.
20 to 16, shall we say?
Yeah, 16 or 20 through 16. Yeah, and if you want, you could go first. You could share your list first.
All right. So I got my list down here.
Kind
Um
of similar, actually.
Number 20, yeah, somewhat similar. Number 20, I got Bam Adebayo. Number 19, I got Chris Middleton. Number 18, Jamal Murray. Number 17, Pascal Siakam. And number 16, I got Anthony Davis. So, the reason why I put Bam towards the bottom at this list is because he did do pretty good for the most part. I feel like he wasn't really like as I think that definitely his performance went under the rug due to the fact that the Heat got gentleman swept. Not really not to blame him obviously because like they were without their best player Jimmy Butler. But for the most part he was still good, so I had to put him on the list. Um Chris Middleton, I also put him on the list because he was pretty good in that lone series against the Pacers. I
Very
mean,
underrated.
Yeah, very underrated. And he was the reason why the Pacers were at least able to like somewhat hang in that series because like
The Bucks.
obviously yeah, that one game that they lost. I mean, the one game that they won without Dame and Giannis. He was the one that put up the numbers to keep them in that series to extend at least one more game. And in the series, obviously, he averaged 25 points. That's pretty good. And Dame, I will say this. I thought about putting Dame on this list, but the reason why I didn't is because he only played in 4 games, as opposed to Chris playing all six.
Yeah, that's why I had him in my honorable mentions. Like he did have like halves where he'd scored like over 30, which was crazy,
Yeah,
but again, he was injured. He didn't play all the games, so that's why he's in my honorable mention.
yeah. And then as far as Jamal Murray goes, he could have been higher if it wasn't for like his struggles shooting from the field. Because like you look at his numbers on the box score, doesn't look bad at all. But his like shooting efficiency wasn't that high. But the reason why I needed to put him on this list was obviously because unfortunately he had those clutch moments. Like obviously those 2 game winners on the Lakers, which was really hard to watch for us. But it showed that like Jamal Murray was the type of guy that no matter how bad of a shooting night he has, he will find a way to still step up when it actually matters down the stretch.
That's
So I had to
so
include him on this
yeah,
list.
that's a really good point. Jamal ended up being in my honorable mentions list due to like his inefficiency, and I guess
And I understand that.
I am a little salty about what he did to the Lakers. So maybe he should have been on the list
Yeah,
due
me
to
too.
those like game winners, but uh,
I
yeah, he
guess
ended up being my in my honorable mentions.
yeah, I guess we shall revisit after you reveal your full list. Like maybe at the end we can have a little like do you regret including or not including the certain guy type reflection. But yeah, we'll talk about that later if wanted. Um but the next guy I included Pascal Siakam.
He
It
was
was
balling.
honestly like he had a pretty good playoff run. And particularly the Celtics series when Tyrese got hurt, he was the one that was keeping them in the games. Without him, they probably get blown out in all those games. But like even like going earlier in the series against the Pacers, he averaged 22 points. I mean, no, my bad. Against the Bucks, he averaged 22 points. And then against the Knicks, I think he was like a little bit more quiet, but even then, he still averaged 20 points. And then against the Celtics, he was the leading scorer again and averaged 23 points. So I gotta give Pascal a lot of credit for stepping up when he needed to. And then number 16, Anthony Davis. So AD, I definitely thought about putting him higher, but ultimately there were a few guys that I felt like deserved a little bit higher rankings for like more reasons than one. But he did pretty good for the most part, I will say. Averaged 28 points and he was 53% from the field shooting. I think there were like I don't remember like his specific performance stats every single game of the series, but there from what I recall, there might have been like 1 or 2 games where he was like a little bit more quiet, or maybe it was more so like certain halves he was a little bit more quiet. Um, but definitely AD, he did pretty good in that one series, and so I had to mention him on the list. So I believe for the most part, those are the reasons why I listed the guys I did from 20 to 16. Um, Memo, would you like to reveal your list from 20 to 16?
Yeah, so at number 20, I have Josh Hart. Number 19, Chris Middleton. So we have Chris Middleton on the same spot. Number 18, I put Bam. Number 17, Paulo. And number 16, Pascal Siakam. Um, yeah, number 20, Josh Hart. I just really wanted to give him as much credit as possible because that man was playing like every single minute for most of the games, to the point where like he ended up like getting injured, or it might not be because of playing so much minutes, but he that was like the only reason why he kind of slowed down. I remember Jalen Brunson didn't start off on the best foot, so Josh Hart would step it up. He would drain these like very clutch threes as well. He was really there for the bigs moments, where the Knicks needed him the most. So I felt like he deserved a shout out. Um, and yeah, moving on, Chris Middleton, as he said, he had clutch moments as well, uh, like tying games up. He was draining crazy threes, looking like Kobe out there, honestly. And it was actually really cool to see Chris Middleton ball out like that because there was some conversations on maybe this guy's washed, maybe he doesn't have it anymore, but he proved everybody wrong. He went out there and was um, contributing as much as he could, even though, as we all know, ended up being bounced in the first round. Um, your number 20 is my number 18, which is Bam Adebayo. I basically put him in there because he was like the only superstar on the Heat and was just trying his best out there. And I thought he deserved something for doing the best that he can with the situation that he had, facing the best team in the league, the Boston Celtics. So I just wanted to shout out Bam. Paulo Banchero had a pretty decent debut, this playoffs. This is his first playoffs, and yeah, he did get bounced, but nobody even expected him to be in this situation. And the fact that he ended up like averaging more points in the playoffs than he did in the regular season shows that he really is there to play. He really is there to win uh, important basketball games, and he ended up being like the lone source for the offense on the Magic. So, uh, yeah, a lot was on his shoulders, and he did pretty well for such a young guy. So, shout out to Paulo, and then my number 16th uh, person on the list is Pascal Siakam, which he did a good job covering. But he had he averaged a good amount of points. He had some big games where he scored like 35 plus. So yeah, shout out to Siakam. And anything you believe is egregious with my list so far? Because right now I do like your list. I think um, someone should be higher, but you'll find out soon. But
Yeah,
uh,
I
what do
have
you
an
think?
idea who you think, but we'll leave it for later. Yeah. For the most part, I don't have a problem with your list. I will say, Josh Hart being on the list is a little bit of a more like sleeper, but I can understand like I'm not mad at that pick. I can understand he did have his big moments. Like maybe there were some other guys that could have made the list over him, but like he did have his moments, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, maybe I should have swapped him with Jamal Murray, but fuck Jamal. I don't want to give him credit. Should we move
But
on to the next section? The what is it, 15 through 11?
yeah. All right. So moving on to 15 through 11. So I can start off by reviewing my list. So at number 15, I got Paulo Banchero. Number 14, I got Tyrese Maxey. Number 13, I got LeBron James. Number 12, I got Karl Anthony Towns. And number 11, Tyrese Halliburton. All right. So starting out with Paulo Banchero. Um, as you mentioned earlier, his first playoff series, he did really good for his first playoff appearance. Um, 27 points, almost 9 rebounds, 4 assists. Not bad for a first time go, especially knowing the fact that Magic, I think a lot of people expected them to be better and like maybe be in the conversation for the playoffs. Not a lot of people necessarily really thought that they would like be that close to advancing. Like probably they would have thought they would get destroyed in the first round if they were to make it. Now obviously the Cavs are not that good, but like still credit to them. They fought hard and almost advanced to the second round in large part due to Paulo's performances. So the next guy on my list, Tyrese Maxey. So I put Tyrese Maxey on this list because he was pretty good for the Sixers all year long. But in this series, not much different. Averaged almost 30 points in the series and shooting 48% from the field, 40% three-point field goals. That's pretty high efficiency for a point guard. So I had to give him his flowers there for sure.
You know what? I
Next
just
guy.
realized that I don't have Tyrese Maxey on my list or even my honorable mentions, even though I was really thinking about it. So you know what? As you were talking about like things that we regret, that's probably the biggest
Yeah.
one. It's not adding Tyrese
Okay.
Maxey.
All right. Remind me at the end if that like there's any more regrets or all that stuff.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. But the next guy on my list is LeBron James. So I think that LeBron is another guy that could have easily been higher on this list if not for the Lakers getting eliminated in the first round. Because like the sample size was just too small. But same as AD, actually exactly the same. Both of them averaged 27.8 points in the series. LeBron's shooting percentage was a little bit lower than AD's shooting percentage. Ultimately speaking, I think the reason why I ranked LeBron higher is just due to the fact that like it just seemed like he showed up like a little bit more in like the bigger moments to me, honestly. And like obviously you can bring up that game 2 brick at the end, but like for the most part like LeBron is still LeBron, so I had to include him there. Um Definitely could have been higher if the Lakers went a little bit further in the playoffs, but for how far they got, I think this is a pretty reasonable spot for where they are for him for how far they made it. And then next guy on the list, Karl Anthony Towns. He had a pretty solid playoff performance for the most part. I think that in the conference finals he wasn't quite as good, but like for the most part, like first round against the Suns, averaged about 18 points, which is like still pretty good on 51% shooting overall and 39 from 3. Not bad for a big man. And then actually my bad. That was actually the stats against Denver in the second round. But yeah, against the Suns in the first round, he actually did better. Over 19 points and 53% from 3 and 53% overall field goal percentage. So that was really good. And then obviously in the conference finals, he was like not quite the same. Still did okay, average almost 20 points. Shooting percentage went down a little bit, 38 overall, but what really went down was his 24% three-point field goal percentage that series. Overall, though, I had to include Cat on this list because one, making it that far, two, overall being pretty consistent, and three, as a big man, like I think he was overall pretty efficient. I had to include Cat on the list for all those reasons. The next guy I ranked is Tyrese Halliburton, and I will say this: he could have easily been higher if he didn't go down injured. And I know that he only missed technically like 2.5 games, but ultimately speaking, I think that there were just a few guys that were a little bit more worthy to be higher on the list. But he certainly didn't disappoint. Like obviously towards the end of the season, he was like a little bit inconsistent, but when he needed to show up big, he was still able to deliver. In the first round, he was like kind of like mid-ish, only averaging 16 points. But he did shoot 43% from the field, so that wasn't bad. And then in the semifinals against the Knicks, that's when we kind of got like Tyrese back on track. He averaged 21 to lead the Pacers and shot a really efficient 54% overall and 44% from three. That was pretty good. And then unfortunately his season got cut short against the Celtics, but to make it to the conference finals for a team that really wasn't expected to go that far before the season, it was really respectable for the Pacers overall, even if they probably shouldn't have been there, obviously due to like Knicks injuries. But huge reason was because of Tyrese Halliburton. So that's why I had to include him on my list. So that being said, I'm gonna hand it over to Memo. Want to reveal your list from 15 to 11?
Yeah, I'll say I like your list. Uh, I'm surprised Tyrese and Cat are that high, but it's not like I have them a lot lower than you. But to share my list, at
Yeah.
number 15, I have Tyrese Halliburton. Number 14, I have Carl Anthony Towns. Number 13, I have Rudy Gobert. Number 12, I have LeBron James. And number 1, I have Joel Embiid. And the reason why I have Tyrese lower than you is because, like, yeah, he did average like a good amount of points. It's was playmaking, all that, but uh there were games where like he was not aggressive at all. He was not playing like the superstar that he is. He would have like only 9 points in a game, like, and he did that like a few times, scoring under 10. So I felt like, as a superstar that we're trying to like claim that you are, you need to do a bit more scoring. The playmaking is there, defense isn't. So if you're not playing defense, you gotta at least score. So that's why I have him a little lower than you. I also have Cat lower than you. He did impress me a lot this playoff run, because I've been kind of a Carl Anthony Towns hater for a bit. Like, we've talked about this a few times, but he did impress me, especially on the defensive side. I think without his defense, they probably wouldn't have won against the Nuggets. So shout out to him there, but he does still make those like stupid fouls, stupid decisions in late game situations. He'll shoot stupid shots. Sometimes he'll make them, but sometimes he'll miss them. So that's why I have him a bit lower. But he was pretty impressive this off season, I guess. Number 13, I have his teammate Rudy Gobert. I felt like his defense was a lot more impactful. At one point, he had like the highest plus minus in the playoffs. Like, he was uh, vital for a lot of the Timberwolves games. And yeah, he did get cooked by Luka, but everybody, most players would get cooked by Luka. So I feel like he got overhated on that front. But yeah, Rudy Gobert did a really good job doing what he's known for, which is defense. Number 12, I got LeBron James, a little higher than you, just barely. but he did average a good amount of points. He did uh, do his thing. You know what LeBron does at an old age. He balled out. I do wish his defensive. Um, I forgot what word I was gonna say, but I wish his defense was better. There was times where he was just letting Aaron Gordon score with ease. So, um, spoiler alert: I have Anthony Davis higher, and that was a big reason why is because of LeBron's defense. Well, Anthony Davis did pretty good on the defensive end, but we'll talk about him later. So, but at the end of the day, it's LeBron. So shout out to him. And then I have Joel Embiid, who, um, although had those dirty plays against the Knicks, he was still pretty good, averaging a good amount of points that I am trying to look up, but due to my setup, I can't see it. But he scored like over 30 points. His plus minus was like +7. Um, he had didn't he have like a 50-point game as well? I could be wrong, but he had like some crazy games. So
He did.
he was looking a lot better than past playoff performances. So that's why I have Joel this high on my list. But what do you think about my list so far? You know, I talked about my nitpicks.
Um,
So do you have any nitpicks for my list?
Not really. Overall, I think that these numbers are, for the most part, reasonable. I did put Joel Embiid higher, but I can understand why you put him where he was, honestly.
Yeah, obviously, like he was amazing, but he was also knocked out in the first round. So I can't put him too
Yeah.
high, but 11 is a good
Yeah.
spot.
I mean, I know. I mean, I assume you have a few other guys knocked out in the first round a little bit higher, right?
Maybe yeah, definitely one. One.
Yeah. Hmm.
I have one person.
But yeah, there's definitely like several different factors to consider. So
Yes.
yeah, we shall see.
But let's reveal
Um,
our next set of players. 10 through 6. Who do you have?
all right. So I will start with my list. So number 10, Nikola Jokic. Number 9, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. Number 8, Joel Embiid. Number 7, Donovan Mitchell. And number 6, I got Jaylen Brown. So, I see by your face you were really shocked by some things, I'm sure.
I
But
definitely.
let me
You gotta explain
explain.
Nikola Jokic. You gotta explain that one.
Oh, I can definitely explain, okay? And here's why, okay? Like I know it sounds crazy that he's number 10, but it just seemed like he was like a little bit lackluster this playoff run in my opinion, honestly. Like he was good, he was not the same as the championship run last year. Like if they would have won, like here's my thing about it. The Nuggets had so many deficits in these two playoff series, and I feel like a lot of it probably was because like he didn't quite do as good as he could have been, honestly. And I think that another part of that is like the rest of the Nuggets team, like they could have stepped up more too. And like granted, they were able to like have a lot of crazy comebacks against the Lakers. Against the Wolves is a different story. I mean, like they won some games against them, but they also choked a 20-point lead in Game 7, and then they got blown out a few games also. I just feel like he wasn't quite the same, honestly. Like his numbers were good still. I mean, like 28 average in round one. I feel like some other guys were a little bit more impressive, honestly. And starting off with the next guy I listed. So, Shea Gilgis Alexander, he had a really impressive playoff run. and like he did really good. Obviously, round one against the Pelicans with the leading average against was 27 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. And then in the Maverick series, he actually did better. Like, arguably speaking, Shea was probably damn well the best player in that series against the Mavs. It's just that the team didn't quite step up as much. Averaged 32, 8 rebounds, 8 assists. So I thought he was like really impressive this playoff run. So I ranked him pretty high. Okay, now number eight, Joel Embiid. Now, I will say this. I understand why you ranked him lower because he got knocked out in the first round. But me personally, I need to consider how impressive his games were. Like, um, obviously he was by far the Sixers' top performer in the playoffs. Um, he averaged 33 points and he had like that one, I think it was game 3 or game 4, he scored like 50 or whatever. Obviously that was his top performance of the run. He was a lot better this playoff series or this playoffs as opposed to his previous history in just one series, and was pretty good from the field. I think like 44% overall, 33 from three, which is honestly respectable as a big man, a center specifically, and average 1.5 blocks. It was pretty impressive. And then Donovan Mitchell, obviously in his team's like and limited playoff appearances, shall we say? Like, well, the thing is, he actually played in a good amount of games. I think he played in like 9 games or like 10 games because obviously round one went to 7. He was really good though. The first round he averaged 29, 5 and 4, and then the second round he was 30, 32, 6 and 5, and only I believe he got injured in game 3, so 3 games. And he was obviously the reason why they won a game in that series, something that the Indiana Pacers couldn't do for some reason. Um, yeah, it was because of Donovan's like really clutch shooting and hot shooting performance. So even though it was like somewhat limited, Donovan Mitchell did like really good this run. And then Jaylen Brown, honestly, I thought about ranking him higher, but there were just like some other guys that I thought like were a little bit more impressive, honestly. But his game really doesn't need much explaining. Obviously, him and Tatum are like the 1A 1B, like on and off switching, and like you could really argue that Tatum is. You could argue that Brown is the real one and Tatum is to the two, but till it can be like inevitably argued, I think that Tatum is for sure still the number one guy. That being said, though, like Jaylen Brown, obviously, like doing wonders. First round, he's averaged 23 points on 52% field goals, 32 from three, quite efficient. Um, Round two, not much different. He was 23 points on 60% field goals, which is very efficient, and 43% from three. And then against the Pacers in the conference finals, he averaged 30 points. That was his best series so far. And 52% from the field, 37 from three. Really impressive there. Um, yeah, definitely had to include him pretty high on the list. So that would be my list from 10 to 6. Um, Memo, you want to reveal your list from 10 to 6?
Yeah, but before I do, I gotta say, with Nikola Jokic being that low, like spoiler, I have him a lot higher. I think that's crazy.
I
Like,
see.
because you said like he didn't seem as dominant like as he did last year, But looking at his stats, like they're pretty similar. He averaged 2 less points, 1 less assist. So nothing too crazy. And then he did have like those moments where he had like a near 40 point triple double when he received his MVP award. So he was there, pretty dominant and just doing his Nikola Jokic stuff. But uh, it is what it is. It is your list. Just having Embiid
Yeah,
over
could have been
Jokic is
higher, but
a little weird to me. But
it is what it is. Hey, my opinion, your opinion.
yup. But yeah, let me go at number 10. I have Anthony Davis. Number 9, I have Kyrie Irving. Number 8, I have Shea. Number 7, I have Donovan Mitchell. And number 6, I have Jalen Brunson. Anthony Davis was awesome during his short stint in the playoffs. Very short, unfortunately. But he was averaging almost 28 points, 15 rebounds, which is almost 16 rebounds, which is insane. About 2 blocks. He was doing his thing, and again, I have him over LeBron because of the defense. Um, like this guy was playing like as good as he was in the 2020 playoffs. Like, and to see him like come back to the season after being ridiculed for being so injured and saying that last playoffs he can't consistently score past 20 points past 2 games. It's cool to see him bounce back and actually like ball out in the playoffs and do his thing. Unfortunately, he got bounced in the first round, but he proved a lot of people wrong uh, in his short stint. So shout out to him. Number 9, I have Kyrie. Obviously, he's in the finals, so he's doing great. He had his big moments throughout the playoffs, but he also had some duds, which like it's easy to forget about. But he did have several games where his shooting wasn't there. He was scoring like around 10 points. So he could be more consistent, but obviously he's doing pretty good since he's in the finals at the moment as the number 2 guy. Number 8, I have Shea, who's been consistently awesome on both ends of the floor. I feel like there's not much I could say. Like he was really carrying the Thunder at points because his surrounding teammates weren't really helping, um, at least offensively. But Shea was always there, contributing and being there for the biggest moments. So was Donovan Mitchell. The same could be said about Donovan Mitchell. He was really carrying those Cavs teams until he got injured. Had huge games against the Magic, um, and yeah, like he's just proved once again that he is a playoff riser. So shout out to Donovan. And then number 6, I have Jalen Brunson, who had a slow start, as I mentioned earlier, but really picked up the pace and was really helping out the Knicks out there offensively, just draining buckets after buckets. Like he couldn't be stopped. So shout out to him, I guess. But yeah, that is my little group. Anything you think is crazy off of my list so far?
Crazy? I wouldn't say crazy. Like obviously there were certain guys I ranked higher, ranked lower, but for the most part, nothing crazy. I could understand why you put these guys in the position that you put them, to be honest. Um, okay.
Yeah, okay. So let's finally reveal our top 5 playoff performers for this year's playoffs. And yeah, I'll have you once again reveal your top 5 first.
All right. So without further ado, we are at our top five, and here is my list. Number five, I got Jalen Brunson. Number four, Kyrie Irving. Number three, Anthony Edwards. Number two, Jason Tatum. And number one, Luka Doncic. All right, so starting with Jalen Brunson, obviously put up crazy numbers this playoff run, and it's unfortunate that his playoff run got cut short due to like all those Knicks injuries getting plagued like crazy. They definitely should be in the Pacers. That was disappointing. And if they would have been in the Pacers, guarantee you they would have at least like given the Celtics a little bit of a run for their money, even if they didn't win that series. That being said, Jalen Brunson being the huge factor, he averaged 36 points in the first round against the Sixers and 43% field goals and 30% threes, which is like not horrible, not great, but it's like good enough, honestly, knowing his high volume shooting percentage. And then in the semifinals against Pacers, he his numbers weren't as big, but the Knicks had a little bit more balance. He still averaged 30 points, 46% field goals. His 3-point percentage was about the same, a little bit higher, 32%. So Jalen Brunson had a pretty good playoff run, so he was worthy of being in the top five for my list. Number four, Kyrie Irving. Obviously, really clutch playoff performances this year. There were a few games where he kind of was a little bit more quiet, but for the most part, I thought that he has been like phenomenal for the Mavericks and really big for Luka having a another superstar as the number two option. Like, obviously, he tried that duo with Porzingis, and unfortunately, it just didn't work out very well. Obviously, we saw what he's capable of doing, like game one, but like, yeah, it just wasn't meant to be, unfortunately. But like this new duo they have is doing wonders. And Kyrie in the first round averaged 27 points and 51% field goal percentage and a very impressive whopping 45% from three against the Clippers. That was really good. And then against OKC in the second round, Kyrie average was a little bit lower, I think, 16 points. But he was still really efficient though. 44% field goals overall, 42% from three, not bad. And then the conference finals against the Timberwolves was by far his best series, aiding up until the finals. He averaged 27 points that series and 49% field goals overall, which is pretty impressive for a guard like that. High volume shooting. He was 38% from three, so really impressive there. Um, Next guy on the list, Ant. Um, so he was having like he was especially really good in the opening two rounds. Against the Suns, he averaged 31 points on 51% shooting and 44% from three, which was like mighty impressive. And against the Nuggets, he had a really good average as well, 28 points, 50% from the field, which is pretty good. 37% from three. So huge reason why they upset the defending champs in the second round. And then against the Mavs in the conference finals, not as good. He tried though. Still averaged 25 points on 43% field goals and 41% from three. Like obviously all those games were close, and the Mavs, I mean um the Wolves probably really could have been a lot closer. Maybe could have even won that series, but obviously everything happened for a reason because they didn't close as well. That being said, now in the top two, Jason Tatum. So obviously, like he did have a little bit of consistency issues in certain games, but for the most part, he was still really impressive. Round one, he averaged 22 points, 42% field goal shooting, 3-point shooting wasn't as great, only 29%. Obviously, he didn't need to do that much because Celtics loaded roster. Round two against the Cavs, he did better. 27 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists in the series. And his shooting volume was his 3-point percentage still wasn't good. 27%. His field goal percentage was for the most part pretty good, 44%. And then that brings us to the conference finals, where it was actually his best series. 30 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists, and he was definitely the clear cut. Well, actually, no, not clear cut. But he definitely had the clear cut best series of the playoffs compared to his first two rounds. 46% from the field and 31% 3-point shooting, which is definitely better in more categories than one. So Tatum definitely has had a good run despite some inconsistencies here and there. But number one is, without a doubt, Luka Doncic. And his game just doesn't really need much explaining. Round one against the Clippers, he averaged 30 points, 41% from the field overall, and his 3-point shooting wasn't really that high, 24%, but doesn't really need to have a high volume, clearly, because he's able to impact the game in other areas. And then against OKC in round two, 25 points, 11 rebounds, and 9 assists per game. He did wonders that series to help them have another upset. And this series, his shooting was definitely a lot more efficient overall. 45% from the field, and his 3-point percentage was as high as 39% as compared to the 20 something. So that was definitely much better there. And then by far his most impressive series, the conference finals against the Wolves, averaging 32 points, 10 rebounds, and 8 assists per game. Luka was just like tearing the Wolves apart. Obviously, he had the game winner in game two, doing wonders. And his shooting was also really efficient that series. 47% overall from the field and 43% from three. So, yeah, Luka clearly showing that he was the best player of the playoffs, and you can even argue maybe the best player in the league overall. But that being said, that would be my top 25 list. Memo, it is your turn to reveal your top 5.
All right, so at number 5, I have your number 2, which is Jason Tatum. He's been mostly consistent. Yeah, there were games where he got carried by his teammates, as we just talked about in game one. But for the most part, he did average a good amount of points, especially as you said in the conference finals. But there's a reason why my number 4 pick got the Eastern Conference Finals MVP over him, which is Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown is number 4 on my list. I thought that he's been the best player for the Celtics so far this playoff run. I just believe he's there for the biggest moments, unlike Tatum. And yeah, I just feel like he's got that dog in him, that Tatum lacks. So ultimately, because of how important uh, Jaylen Brown has been during certain moments, like that game tying 3 against the Pacers in game 1, that's why I have him over Tatum. Number 3, I have Anthony Edwards, who had some stinkers. Let's be real. He had some stinkers in the second round, especially in the third round against the Mavs. But he also had some great games, scoring over 30 a bunch of times, especially in the first round. Playing great defense, able to slow down certain players like Jamal Murray. He was locking him up at times. And he was just an amazing leader for this team. And I can't wait to see how he progresses moving forward because he is definitely a superstar. He showed out this playoff, so I want him to continue doing great things. Number two, I have your number 10, which is Nikola Jokic. Again, I feel like you just played like Nikola Jokic. You played like the MVP in of the league, doing Nikola Jokic things. Whether it's scoring efficiently, playmaking to get easy buckets for his teammates, rebounding like crazy, having a near 40-point triple double. Like, he was definitely not the reason why the Nuggets got bounced in the second round, that's for sure. He was doing his best out there, just playing like Nikola Jokic, who is debatably one of the greatest players in the world. But ultimately, number one, I gave it to the greatest player in the world at the moment, which is Luka Doncic, who had a slow start due to injuries, obviously, especially that knee. It's been bothering him. So the first two rounds weren't his best, at least to his standards. But it was really the third round where things picked up and he started playing like playoff Luka, showing the world that he is that guy. And now I'm very excited to see him in the finals, possibly, hopefully, maybe winning his first ring. So we'll see. But yeah, that is my list. Any thoughts on my overall list?
Um, Overall, your list, I will say, not bad. Obviously, as you mentioned, there were a few guys that maybe could have made the list. As far as who you would take off to replace those guys, I'm gonna leave that to you if there's anything you would like to talk about, like afterwards. Um, Overall, I think your list is fine. I mean, I think there were some guys that clearly I listed higher or lower. I will say this in your top five. As much as I would have liked to have listed Brown over Tatum, because obviously I like Brown better than Tatum. I just feel like Tatum overall was better, so I just had to include Tatum higher personally. Um, but like I can see where you're coming from and like your personal preferences and whatnot. So um, it's okay. Yeah, I will say for the most part, that's what I gotta say about your list. Um, I'm sure you would also like to have a few comments as well, right? Regarding my list or and then we can talk about our own list stuff after.
I guess not too crazy. Like, I already complained. I already bitched at you. Like, you already took a
You
beating
ranted
from me.
already.
Yeah, yeah. Like, it was the basically just Nicola. I guess is way too low, and
Yeah.
I guess
And
there's
I will
other
say
player
this,
like Kyrie, maybe a bit too high as well. Maybe Joel's a bit too high, but like at the end of the day, it's your list. Like, uh, it's not the
yeah.
end of the world.
Yeah. And I will say this, looking back, probably I did rank Jokic a little bit too low. I don't know. I just think the reason why I ranked him this low was because I felt like those other guys I listed higher than them just like seemed a little bit more impressive to me, like what they were doing. But I can argue like maybe I could have like at least swapped Jokic and Embiid maybe, and possibly even put him higher than Mitchell. I don't know about SGA though. I feel like maybe I would still put SGA over Jokic. Um, but yeah, overall, Yeah, I think that one of my bigger regrets probably would be the Jokic should have been higher thing. And I guess that can bring us now to like personal regrets on our own list. Um, I think for me on my list, the main thing is just Jokic probably should have been a little bit higher. And then other than that, like I definitely when I was making my list, I definitely had to make like several adjustments throughout the process. Like originally I was almost thinking about including Drew Holiday, Nas Reed, and then I forgot certain guys. Like I left off certain guys. I'm like, oh shit, I need to put these guys. Yeah, sorry. These guys are gonna have to be honorable mentions. And I will say this, one of the slightly controversial ones that I didn't put on my list, maybe if you want to consider controversial, Rudy Gobert. Um, I feel like he definitely could have been worthy of being on the list, but like when I was looking at his like stats when doing my research, which I know like being like the box score, I mean like there's always a lot of those memes like for those people that like only look at the stats. It's kind of misleading because like a lot of the good players do a lot of stuff that are not on the stat sheets. But I will say this, when I was looking at the stat sheet, like the overall series overviews, it seems like a lot of the times Rudy is like pretty like not even in the top 5 on the Timberwolves like leading stat leaders. Like round 1 against the Suns, he was top 3 performer, but round 2 against Denver, granted he did miss like a game or two. He was the he was ranked like 6, or he only missed one game. Slight correction, but he was only ranked 6 overall in that series. And then against Dallas, he was also 6. And then on top of that, I agree with you. He definitely got like over a lot of over hate for like Luca making a shot over him, but definitely did get burned a little bit. So I will say that. Um, yeah, I think that honestly the reason why I didn't include him was because of like it seemed like he could have been a little bit better overall. But yeah, definitely I could have at least been worthy of an honorable mention. I feel like some of these other guys maybe were a little bit more I guess some of these other guys I felt like I needed to talk about a little bit more that I wanted to put them instead. Because like I did have Rudy on my honorable mention, but he was probably like the sixth guy listed. And 6 players might be a little bit too much, so I just listed 5 of them. But aside from that and like Jokic ranked a little bit lower than he probably should have been, overall I think I'm still okay with the list I made. That being said, I know you mentioned a little bit about your list on what you maybe would have changed earlier, but I guess would you like to add on or re-emphasize anything?
Add on, no. I think what I said earlier is the only change I would make, which is adding Tyrese Maxey probably at 20 and replace him with Josh Hart. Um,
Mhm.
and then Jamal Murray could stay as a honorable mention.
Oh,
Honestly,
so you're gonna keep Jamal Murray on honorable mention?
yeah, I prefer the rest of the guys. Honestly,
Okay. Yeah. So you think that do you think you would actually literally add Tyrese but just have him at 20? Like you wouldn't want to move him ahead of any other guys on your list?
yeah, because he was like the second best player on a team that got bounced in the first round. You know, like how much better could we consider someone like him compared to someone who contributed a lot more to a winning team, you know?
Mm. I can see where you're coming from. Yeah. All right then. I guess that would be pretty much a wrap on our top 20 playoff performers listed.